Good evening everyone, welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy, the Hindu News Analysis. Today is 1st December 2025 and today we have some very important topics for our discussion. So one by one we'll be discussing all these topics in detailed manner. So the first topic with which we're going to start this session is about Cyclone Dittwa. Now in fact, Cyclone Dittwa has created havoc, or it has created a disastrous effect on the southern state of Tamil Nadu and Sri Lanka. Now in fact, hundreds of people were died in Sri Lanka and in fact in Tamil Nadu, so it has also caused a destructive impact. Now in this backdrop, let's understand what are these cyclones, how the cyclones are being formed, and what are the measures that must be taken to mitigate the worst effect of these cyclones. Now we'll discuss this from the mains exam perspective. But before going into this, from the syllabus point of view, this is very important for General Studies paper 1. In your geography portion, this could be very important. So let's first understand about Cyclone Dittwa very briefly before going into the discussion about the tropical cyclones. Now let's first understand the Cyclone Dittwa and its relation with the tropical cyclones, because Cyclone Dittwa is also considered as a tropical cyclone. Now one thing that we should know that Cyclone Dittwa has left a worst effect on Sri Lanka and the southern state of Tamil Nadu and even the southern portions of Andhra Pradesh. Now in fact, it is one of the worst cyclone that hit Tamil Nadu and Sri Lanka. So therefore, in this context, these kind of cyclones have been highlighting India's vulnerability to those tropical cyclones, right? So in fact, during tropical cyclones, or for that matter during Dittwa cyclone, now in fact a very heavy rainfall can be expected, high speed winds gushing at speeds of around 150 km/h, floods, landslides, they're very common during the tropical cyclones. Now in fact, all these factors, they might cause excessive amounts of human losses, economic losses, infrastructure losses, right? So losses to the crops. So therefore they can actually create a worst effect on the development. So it will be very difficult to recover from such a worst disasters. So therefore this particular incident, so what lessons that we could actually learn from cyclones like this, particularly Cyclone Dittwa? So because once we have understood the vulnerability, once we have understood the consequences of such cyclones or severe cyclones, then the focus should be on adopting mitigation and adaptation measures, building resilient infrastructure. So for example, if you look at Odisha is successful when it comes to dealing with cyclones. Now here, whenever we talk about the success stories of reducing vulnerability from tropical cyclones, we must mention Odisha, because Odisha has substantially reduces its vulnerability from the tropical cyclones. Now Odisha is also the state which affects the most because of tropical cyclones. Now what measures have to be adopted so that we could achieve resilience and we can build resilient infrastructure? We could adopt the climate sensitive policies, or climate adaptive disaster management should be the focus. So let's understand these factors in detail. So firstly, Cyclone Dittwa and the impact of Cyclone Dittwa on different areas. As I have already told you that Cyclone Dittwa has hit both the southern coast of Tamil Nadu and also Sri Lanka. Now it originates in Bay of Bengal, and in fact the rainfall exceeding 200 mm in several regions. So excess and intense rainfall over a period of time leads to what? It might leads to floods, landslides and other worst effects as well, right? So rivers could overflow. Overflowing rivers means flooding the nearby areas. So therefore, in fact, the country has witnessed over 330 deaths. So Sri Lanka has so far witnessed around 330 deaths and several people feared missing. And apart from that, the cyclone Dittwa has also caused other major disasters such as widespread landslides, flooding, destruction of homes, the infrastructure, everything has been destroyed by cyclone Dittwa. However, according to some estimates, that cyclone Dittwa had worst effect on eastern district and central districts. So they affected due to hilly terrain that magnified the landslide risks in Sri Lanka. So apart from hundreds of people lost their lives, several feared missing, and in fact thousands were displaced because their homes are being destroyed. So that's the reason that they are being displaced. And apart from that, the major infrastructure losses have also been emerged. And in fact, recently we have discussed as part of our news analysis that the Indian government has launched Operation Sagar Bandhu to assist Sri Lanka at this point of time. Right? So in this context, let's understand what impact did cyclone Dittwa had on India. So as I've already told you that the southern part of India, particularly Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh, were hit by the cyclone Dittwa. Now, first thing that we should understand that India has a long coastline of 7,516 kilometers. So this is obvious and a very well-known fact. So apart from that, 76% of it is prone to cyclones and tsunamis. Right, so 76% of 7,560 kilometers of long coast is vulnerable to tropical cyclones and tsunamis as well, because we have experienced a 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami and the trail of destruction it has left. And apart from that, every year both eastern coast and western coast of India face cyclones. So because of climate change and global warming, the intensity and frequency of cyclones has been further increasing, and this is very well known fact. Because to form cyclones, a certain conditions are required. Now one such condition is the ocean temperatures, right, or sea surface temperatures. So if sea surface temperatures are more than 25 degrees Celsius or around 29 degrees Celsius, it may trigger the tropical cyclones. Now, because of the global warming and climate change, what has been happening? The sea surface temperatures are increasing. So increasing sea surface temperatures may trigger cyclones. Their intensity has been increasing and the frequency has also been increasing. Right? So it has been creating the worst effect across the coastal states of India. So losses of agriculture, loss of lives, loss of infrastructure, right? So loss of houses, displacement of people, climate refugees. So all these major problems that people have been facing because of. Now, what specific impact cyclone Dittwa has on India? Right? So in fact, Indian Meteorological Department has already issued red and orange alerts for both Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu, because so this is a severe cyclone and this may have a higher effect, a worst effect on both of these states. So however, the worst effect is on Sri Lanka, but Tamil Nadu has witnessed a very lower casualties. So in fact, it has reported that only 3 deaths were reported in Tamil Nadu, but still Tamil Nadu has been battling with a large scale rainfall, localized flooding, flight cancellations, transport disruptions because of damage to the roads. So it affects the electricity supply. It also affects the connectivity, all these things. Right? So in fact, so agricultural damage is the major, because this is all harvest season. We all knew about this, right? So in a major part of India, so November and December months are harvest months for rice. Now during the harvesting time, if any such cyclone or large scale rainfall hits the paddy fields, so this may create a large scale damage to the farmers, right? So therefore a notable damage has been reported for agriculture, with losses in horticulture, livestock, paddy fields in all these areas. So this is how the cyclone has affected India as well. So let's briefly understand what are the major causes of cyclones. Now in fact, there are some ideal conditions which are required for the formation of cyclones. So how cyclones are triggered or how cyclones are being formed. Now let's first understand what are those ideal conditions which are required for the formation of cyclones. Now in fact these factors are a combination of atmospheric factors and oceanic factors. So both atmospheric and ocean factors combining together, they form tropical cyclones. Now in fact these factors are very important, right? For example, the warm sea surface temperatures, right? So temperatures about 26 degrees Celsius or 27 degrees Celsius, right? So both Bay of Bengal and Arabian Sea has been experiencing higher temperatures because of the climate change, right? So higher temperature means so ideal conditions for the formation of tropical cyclones, and their intensity and frequency may also increase with increasing temperature, right? Because if there is a higher temperature, then there will be a sufficient supply of heat and moisture to the tropical cyclones. So for the tropical cyclones, heat and moisture is very, very important. And second most important factor is presence of a low pressure system. Now in fact the presence of low pressure system, it actually acts as a trigger for the tropical cyclone, right? So over a period of time, what happens, this low pressure system intensifies. Now intensifying a low pressure system may turn into a severe cyclone, a moderate cyclone having a eye and a wall as well. Now in fact it should also have a vertical wind shear. Now this vertical wind shear, so this is vertical wind shear, and this vertical wind shear will enable stable cyclone structure. And stable cyclonic structure is also very important so that it can sustain itself for a longer periods of time. And then the Coriolis force. Now we all knew about this Coriolis force. The Coriolis force is maximum at poles and it is absent at the equator, right? So Coriolis force also helps in the rotational movement of air around the cyclone eye. So around the cyclone eye. So therefore the Coriolis force is also very, very important. And the other factor about the Coriolis force is that the winds move towards the left in the southern hemisphere and towards the east in the northern hemisphere, right? Apart from that, the latent heat release from the condensation, right? So whenever the condensation has been taking place, right? So condensation, generally water vapor converts into water or rain droplets, and then heat will be released, and this heat is called as latent heat. And latent heat released from condensation reinforces intensification. It further reinforces the intensification of the tropical cyclone. So these are the conditions which are actually required for the formation of tropical cyclones. So I hope you have understood this. Now in fact let's also look into it. So cyclones form over warm ocean waters, because warm ocean waters may supply heat and moisture to the tropical cyclones. And in fact when any low pressure system developed in those waters, it may act as a trigger for the tropical cyclones. Now in fact they actually draw energy from the latent heat, which is released as water vapor condenses, leading to the violent storms and heavy rainfall over the area which is actually under the influence of the tropical cyclone or low pressure system, right? So these are the causes. So let's understand challenges in managing the tropical cyclones. So what challenges it can actually pose when it comes to managing or dealing with the cyclones? So it has actually poses certain challenges. For example, it is not easy to predict the tropical cyclones, particularly at this point of time, because the frequency and intensity of tropical cyclones has increased because of climate change. So even if we have an early warning systems, it will be very difficult to predict the severity and nature of these tropical cyclones. So they are becoming too volatile and dynamic in nature, right? So in fact the rapid intensification of these cyclones, so it actually reduces the evacuation time. For example, imagine that this is the area which is vulnerable to tropical cyclones, and imagine that there is a tropical cyclone that is going to hit this area. Now, in fact, the rapid intensification of this tropical cyclone will have a lesser time to evacuate the people who are living in low-lying areas or vulnerable areas. So that may increases the vulnerability of people, first thing. So second thing is that it is difficult to forecast precisely the amount of rainfall that a particular area may receive, and even the flood zones as well. So imagine that there is a river and excess rainfall or heavy rainfall, and in fact the river banks overflow and they submerge nearby areas, right? So it is very difficult to precisely with accuracy identify or found out the areas which are vulnerable to the floods. So this could be another major challenge. So let's understand the geographical vulnerability as well. So just now we have discussed that India has a long coastline, and a majority of this coastline is vulnerable to cyclones and tsunamis. So however, these coastal areas, the problem with India's coastal areas, they are densely populated. So highly densely populated. So therefore, the dense populations, it will be very difficult to evacuate, and they would be more and more vulnerable because they are the first one who are exposed to storm surges and flooding as well. So this is what happened in 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami and several other cyclones, for example Cyclone and 1999 super cyclone in Odisha, and another cyclone in 1977 in Andhra Pradesh called Divisima Uppena. So all these cyclones, those people who are living in low-lying coastal areas, they are more and more vulnerable. Now in fact, so with heavy rainfall, with flooding, the risk of landslide may also increase as well, because landslide, so when there is a heavy rainfall, in that case the soil starts loosening. So loosening soil may trigger the landslide under the influence of gravity. So what about the villages? What about the people who are living on the foothills of these mountains? So therefore they are the worst affected. In Sri Lanka also it has experienced the same, and because of landslides hundreds of people are also died. And then infrastructure and livelihood risks as well. So floods not just cause loss of lives, they may also cause losses to the existing infrastructure. It may also cause risks to the livelihoods of the people. In South Asia, most of the countries are the developing countries, underdeveloped countries. So securing the livelihoods of the people is very important. However, because of these natural disasters, particularly like cyclones, so road blockages, connectivity disruptions, telecom breakdowns, power outages, all these things are expected. Now it will also take a very high time to recover from these disasters, right? So agricultural damages further affect the long-term rural livelihoods. So majority of the people who depends on agriculture, they are poor, and they practice agriculture taking loans from the local money lenders or from any banks, right? So if the insurance amount that the government has been providing them is not adequate, then of course it may be problematic, pushing them into the debt trap or poverty cycle. So what measures, what mitigation measures need to be adopted in this context? It is important to adopt mitigation measures, right? So if we talk about the mitigation measures, why don't we invest more on early warning systems and forecasting, so that we will develop the high resolution weather models, and we will identify the vulnerable areas, we will evacuate the people on a timely basis. So that is very important. And apart from that, why don't we bring together all the countries in the Arabian Sea and Bay of Bengal, Indian Ocean littoral areas, so that we could share the data, and that will help us collectively deal with these problems. However, the solution should be collectively dealing with these issues, because it is not specific to India or any other country. So all these countries must come together, they pool their resources, they invest in R&D, and they come up with the best early warning systems. And then there is a need to build a resilient infrastructure. So if you build a resilient infrastructure, they will be able to withstand the worst effects of the natural disasters, right? So for that to happen, why don't we have a stricter building codes? And why don't we have a cyclone resilient housing in those vulnerable areas which are vulnerable to the cyclones? And apart from that, drainage has to be improved, and the urban sponges, for example lakes, ponds, they have to be rejuvenated, and sledging of riverbanks have to be taken up, and coastal protection structures have to be carried out. And then the community preparedness is very important, because community is the first responders and also the first people who would face the disasters. So therefore, why don't we conduct regular mock drills for the people, evacuation planning, awareness campaigns, and even strengthening disaster response forces and shelters? So these measures have to be adopted. And then climate adoption is also very important, right? So for that to happen, so urban planning should be integrated with climate risk assessment and protection of natural buffers such as mangroves and wetlands. So all these measures must have to be taken in order to deal with these cyclones in a better manner, and also reduce vulnerability of people or people who are living in very nearby areas. So next important topic is about police reforms. So in fact, so Prime Minister Narendra Modi emphasized on the need for police reforms, and this has been given in the Hindu newspaper, and from the syllabus point of view this could be very important for general studies paper 2. So let's understand about the police reforms in India. Now in fact, so police reforms in India has been recognized as a long pending issue, because in fact the public trust, public perception on police in India is not as good as expected, right? So therefore it is essential, it is important, and it is a long pending issue, and this is important for strengthening national security, improving governance architecture, and even ensuring the citizens trust over the law enforcement agencies and law and order machinery. Now in fact, Prime Minister Narendra Modi recently addresses the 60th All India DGP IGP conference in Raipur, right? So in fact he underscores the need for modernization, public trust, interagency coordination, better preparedness for emerging security challenges. So these are the essential factors that have to be inculcated, that have to be improved within the police service. So these are the aspects that Prime Minister Narendra Modi had emphasized on. Now apart from that, there is a need for a holistic framework, and this holistic framework is crucial and important to meet the demands of increasing or rapidly transforming nation, right? So in this context, let's understand what are the structural and organizational reforms that Prime Minister Narendra Modi emphasized on. But before that, let's understand the need for reform. Now in this context, we all knew that 7th schedule deals with the division of powers between the center and states. Now in this division of powers, police and public order are state subjects under the 7th schedule of the Indian Constitution. So what is the need for reforms? The need for reforms is colonial, archaic, outdated laws, custodial death, and in fact the custodial deaths, custodial torture has been increasing, and lack of accountability on the part of the police, political interference, poor gender sensitivity, community caste bias, and no anti-torture law. So all these factors have been highlighting that there is a need for professionalism into the police forces. There is a need to strengthen the positive public perception and trust on the police forces. So for that purpose, Prime Minister Narendra Modi also emphasized on a comprehensive framework which also takes into account police reforms, professionalizing the police forces, right? So let's understand modernizing policing framework in India. Now in fact, so India, despite 75 years of its independence, it continuously dependent on the colonial era Police Act of 1861, right? So in many states still police is functioning as per the Police Act of 1861. Despite, so there is a landmark judgment of the Supreme Court in 2006. This judgment is known as Prakash Singh versus Union of India 2006 case. So this is a landmark judgment on police reforms, but despite this judgment of the Supreme Court, many states' police forces are functioning as per the colonial era Police Act of 1861. Secondly, Prime Minister Narendra Modi clearly highlighted there is a need for professionalism into the police forces, and police forces should be more sensitive towards the weaker sections, marginalized section, disadvantaged sections, and also women. They needs to be more responsive towards the needs of the public. So this is the way to improve trust and the perception of public about the police forces. Now, in fact, strengthening urban policing is also very important to prevent crimes in urban areas. For example, now with the changing needs of the urban areas, there is a need for specialization within the police services. For example, the focus should be on cybercrime, traffic management, crowd control, right? So therefore, the needs of these urban areas have been changing. The nature of the crime has been changing. So therefore, it has been highlighting that there is a need to bring in professionalism. There is a need to bring in multidisciplinary, multi-diverse area of policing in urban centers. And then strengthening the coastal and island security is also another area that has been emphasized by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Now, earlier we have discussed that India has a long coastline of 7,516 kilometers. So therefore, this long coastline also necessitates the coastal security, coastal surveillance, which should be robust, and it should be further strengthened, whatever architecture that we have. So this is the existing architecture, right? So the coastal security scheme involves marine policing up to 12 nautical miles from the shore. So this marine policing function is mostly performed by the state police, and Indian Coast Guard from 12 nautical miles to 200 nautical miles, and Indian Navy beyond 200 nautical miles. So this is an integrated coastal security scheme. However, so in this conference, Prime Minister Narendra Modi emphasized on innovative coastal security models, integrating uninhabited islands and advanced maritime monitoring is also very important. So we all knew that the 26/11 Mumbai terror attacks, the terrorists came to Mumbai from Pakistan through marine routes. Now, in fact, post 26/11 attacks, schemes like Coastal Security Scheme and Sagar Kavach exercises, so they actually improved capacities, and even the integration gaps still remaining, and there is a need to focus on these integration gaps. And then technology driven reforms is also another area that has been emphasized. For example, technology has been emerging, it has been changing, the nature of crime is also changing. So therefore, Prime Minister Narendra Modi stressed on the effective use of NAT grid. So that NAT grid primarily based on data integration, right? So therefore, integrating diverse databases for a real-time intelligence, right? So in fact, NAT grid, National Intelligence Grid. So this is an attached office under the Ministry of Home Affairs, and it aims to create online database for collating scattered pieces of information of core security agencies and putting them on a single platform is the objective of NAT grid. So whatever minor information all the agencies have, so all the minor information will be collected and they will be pieced together. They will be, attached together. Thus, that is the objective of this NAT grid. And so Ministry of Home Affairs is the actual ministry under which NAT grid is working. And then linking systems like NAT grid with AI driven analytics. So this can generate actionable insights for counter-terrorism, crime mapping, and even predictive policing as well. So for example, Crime and Criminal Tracking Network System, CCTNS, it covers 97% of police stations all across the country. And then ICJS, interoperable criminal justice system, it promotes data exchange across courts, prisons, forensics, and even police stations as well. So therefore reforms are needed, but these reforms must be technology driven, technology oriented reforms. And then law enforcement and social issues is another very important area. So we all knew that India has been facing the worst effect because of the left-wing extremism, and left-wing extremism is also the one of the biggest internal security threat that India has been facing. However, in recent times, because of a number of initiatives that the union government has brought in, for example, Operation Samadhan and all other initiatives and programs, so the left-wing extremism related incidents have reduced over 80% since 2010. So apart from that, Prime Minister Modi has also emphasized on regularly monitoring the banned outfits, ensuring the holistic development of the LWE liberated areas through infrastructure development, education, livelihood initiatives, hospitals, educational institutions, roads, all these things have to be built. And then addressing the drug abuse. So here understand that India wanted to become a drug-free India by the year 2047 along with Viksit Bharat. So therefore, we have to address the problem of drug abuse and drug trafficking, and in fact, the police forces need to play a very important role. So for that to happen, there is a whole of government approach involving integrating enforcement with rehabilitation and community intervention. However, National Crime Records Bureau reports a steady increase in narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances cases in India. So therefore, there is a need to effectively deal with this problem through a multi-tier coordination between the law enforcement agencies, center, state, and other different departments. And then community policing and legal awareness is also another very important area. So here in India, there is a need to transform public perception, public trust about the police forces. For that to happen, so youth focused outreach for the police forces, gender sensitive policing, friendly policing, and policing which is sensitive towards the needs of the weaker sections, vulnerable sections, and then a grievance redressal mechanisms which should be transparent. The police forces must be accountable to the people, and even all these things are important and essential to build trust among the public and also change the public perception about the police forces. Now, in fact, reinvigorating the idea of tourist police. So this can enhance the safety and the tourism confidence in India as well. So however, we all knew that in India, the criminal laws have been changed, or they have been called with a different names. So in line with the modern needs, right? So which are known as new criminal laws. So Prime Minister Narendra Modi also emphasized on public awareness of the revised criminal codes. So there are 3 revised criminal codes: Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, Bharatiya Shiksha Saksha Adhiniyam, and Bharatiya Nagarik Suraksha Adhiniyam Sanhita. So these are the 3 criminal codes that Prime Minister Narendra Modi emphasized that police forces must try and increase awareness among the people. So overall, these reforms aims to make justice delivery more efficient and even victim centric, gender sensitive. However, Supreme Court previously has given 7 directives for the police reforms. For that, the Supreme Court has recommended that there is a need to constitute State Security Commission in every state. And then DGP should have a fixed tenure for 2 years. And 2-year term must for SPs and station house officers. And separate investigation and law and order functions for the police forces. And then there is a need to establish a police establishment board at the state level, set up police complaints authorities at the state and district levels on the lines of National Legal Services Authorities Act, and set up National Security Commission at the central level for the coordination. So these are the 7 directives that Supreme Court has given, and these 7 directives are also given as part of bringing police reforms, transparency and accountability in the functioning of police forces. And next very important topic is about the Great Nicobar project. So let's understand the Great Nicobar project. What are the concerns that environmentalists have expressed? What should be the way forward? Now, from the syllabus point of view, this could be very important for General Studies paper 3 and your prelims examination as well. And this has been given in the Hindu newspaper, right? So let's understand the topic first. Now, in fact, the Great Nicobar Island, it is part of the Andaman and Nicobar Island. So Andaman and Nicobar Island is one of the biodiversity hotspots in the world because of its rich biodiversity and fauna and flora, which is endemic in nature, which is found only in that particular location, right? So therefore, it has emerged as a focal point of debate. The focal point of debate is because of a planned mega infrastructure project and island's exceptional ecological sensitivity, right? So the island is exceptionally sensitive to the biodiversity. So even any such project has been planned or launched, started by the union government. So since it has a rich biodiversity, if any such project is being launched without proper environmental impact assessment, there might be a large scale destruction of the pristine ecology and even the biodiversity. However, so the significant aspect of it is in the Nicobar Islands, new species have been discovered. So however, there is discovery of new species in the Nicobar Islands. So it highlights the immense biodiversity and even raising critical questions about the conservation and sustainable development aspects. Now, let's understand the exceptional biodiversity of our Great Nicobar Island. So where the Great Nicobar Island project is planned. As part of the Great Nicobar project, a township will be constructed, an airport will be built, and container transshipment terminal will be established, and a power plant will also be established. So in fact, all these projects require a conversion of a huge amount of forest land to establish these facilities. And in fact, that's where it leads to deforestation, loss of biodiversity, and even loss of the pristine ecology as well. So first understand the new species which are discovered recently in Great Nicobar Island. So since 2021, scientists have documented nearly 40 new species, right? So 40 new species have been documented in the Great Nicobar Island since 2021, right? So therefore, these new species which are actually discovered including Lycodon irvini, which is named after Steve Irwin. So this is the Lycodon irvini, which is also known as wolf snake, which has been discovered in the Great Nicobar Islands. And apart from that, the other fauna including 2 frog species, 4 crabs, and 2 geckos are also found, and numerous insects such as flies, moths, and beetles were also found. These are all new species, right? So around 40 new species were found. And in fact, nearly half of those discoveries were made in the year 2025 itself. So therefore, it has been indicating that there is an active biodiversity, evolution of biodiversity, and even the unexplored ecological richness of Great Nicobar. So in case if the government is going ahead with this Great Nicobar project, it may lead to the loss of this biodiversity. So that is the key concern of environmentalists. However, the Great Nicobar Islands also have a rare and threatened species as well. For example, we have just discussed about the Lycodon irvini, which is a wolf snake. So in fact, this Lycodon irvini, it has just only 4 recorded sightings so far. So it shows that it has extremely restricted range. It is not found everywhere, even in the Great Nicobar Island. And in fact, scientists recommend it to be classified as endangered species under International Union for Conservation of Nature's criteria. So highlighting that it's imminent threats, because this Lycodon irvini is recently discovered. And that's why still it has not got any status in the IUCN, but scientists have been recommending that it should be part of endangered species so that it will get a greater protection. And apart from that, a new bird species is also discovered, which is Great Nicobar crake, which is also known as Rallina. This is the Great Nicobar creek, right? So in fact, it has been photographed only thrice in over a last decade. Now, in fact, it has also been going through the morphological changes all over the body, and it shows the unique features and suggesting that it may be new to science as well. So therefore, it is very clear that a Great Nicobar hosts a great biodiversity. Now, in fact, if you look at the biodiversity indicators of Great Nicobar Islands, it hosts 650 different flora species, over 1800 fauna species, and 20% endemism in some animal groups. So endemism actually involves that those species which are found only in the Nicobar group of islands, nowhere else in the world, which is endemism. So therefore, it has a rich endemism also. So all these factors have been reinforcing that the Great Nicobar Island is known for the finest remaining tropical rainforest in the world. So therefore, it actually deserves a heightened protection rather than destroying this pristine ecosystem in the name of new projects. However, so what are the conservation concerns amid mega project? So first, it has two dimensions. One is ecological sensitivity, and another dimension is development versus ecology debate. So we have understood from the biodiversity point of view, from the ecology point of view, how important the Great Nicobar Island, because it harbors India's most pristine tropical rainforest. So therefore, it requires heightened or total protection. And in fact, in recent times, species are also discovered continuously. So the continuous discovery of new species that we don't know before signifies that scientific understanding of the islands is still incomplete. So therefore, any such project is launched without having a greater scientific understanding, without having the environmental impact assessment. So it will lead to the loss of biodiversity that we still exploring. And then there is another debate, which is development versus ecology debate. So the mega project, which involves the transshipment terminals, airports, tourism zones, so all these factors may risk habitat fragmentation. So habitat fragmentation, displacement of tribal communities, species loss, biodiversity loss, and even irreversible ecological damage. So therefore, the presence of critically rare species raises questions about ecological cost of such developmental projects. So therefore, these are the conservation concerns and development versus ecological conservation debate. So anyway, that's all for